welcome to the Earth Feels podcast.
I'm Rose.
And I'm Christine.
Welcome to Earth Feels, the podcast for people feeling overwhelmed by the endlessly gloomy climate news.
Where every week we have soul-based conversations about climate change and explore the idea that climate change may be happening for us as much as it is happening to us.
If you are ready to shift your focus and secure the future for our kids and our grandkids, then this is the podcast for you.
And yes, we do know how to spell. Hi, Rose.
Hello, Christine.
Today's question is,
how is climate change affecting public health?
I'm so excited that we have a guest today. Her name is Ronda. Now, is it Seifert? Is that?
It is Seifert, yes.
Okay, so Ronda has been a Facebook friend of mine since 2016. She's a nurse, and she's also a very committed climate-concerned citizen, parent. And the reason we connected is she wrote a really good article on the Huffington Post back in 2016 talking about, do you remember the headline? I just remember it was about climate change as a terminal illness.
Oh, yes, that one. Yes. It basically, it was an analogy to our health. I addressed the public health aspect of climate change, I think, in that one.
Yeah.
I also wrote one for conservatives, why conservatives should be concerned about climate change, and just address some of those values that I think pertain, and hope. And I think a lot, that article also is pretty appropriate, especially now, because I think we have a lot of common values, especially our love for children, that makes that article also very appropriate, and that we hopefully can find those common values and work together to solve this public health crisis.
Are you in the States, or you're you're in Canada?
I am in Arizona.
Okay. So you know what's
US.
going on here between the left and the right, and liberals and conservatives, and somehow we have to pull together, and it seems like our children are our shared value.
Definitely. Absolutely. I agree. I think the framing of climate change, first off, I think some of the economic framing is inaccurate. I really think that conservatives, if they could understand the tremendous economic potential in green technologies, even that I think has been being framed incorrectly, but especially, so I think there are a lot of solutions that conservatives could really get behind, but especially in terms of public health, we're, as doctors and nurses, we're being called to action because the public health aspect is it's so critical. And so I think if people truly understood how climate change is impacting our health right now already, and how that's going to grow, I think people, the more they understand that, the more they realize we need to take action. We need to work on solutions urgently.
So how are you seeing, are you in nursing right now?
Yes.
Okay, so
I
how
work
are
in
you
public
seeing
health, yes.
are the public health being impacted by climate at this point?
Well, in my state, in Arizona, the ways that we're especially impacted are our air quality. That's a huge area. Heat impacts a lot of things, the particulates that impact air quality, and then that air quality then has impacts on our health. So, for example, I'm a maternal child health, so my areas of focus are children and pregnant women especially. I have other areas as well, but those are my main areas. And air quality impacts, it causes asthma. If someone already has a respiratory disease, it worsens their symptoms. It impacts women, their pregnancy outcomes. If we're having more wildfires, just like California, Arizona is also experiencing a lot of wildfires, and Colorado, our whole area. And that smoke doesn't stay in one place, it travels and widely. And so we're all experiencing poor air quality because of that, and it has lots of health impacts. It's been interesting looking at COVID and how it causes inflammation in the body, and some of the ill effects of COVID is actually inflammatory responses in the body. And I think of air quality, those little particulates that get in there, they cause a similar but slower inflammation in the body, and there's just it impacts a lot of areas of health. We're seeing every year a growing number of people dying from heat-related illness. I think it's like at least 250 a year in Arizona are dying. And one of our health departments, Maricopa County Health Department, has done some really great studies on it. I think they were expecting a lot of people were getting those effects when they were heat illness when they were outside, and they actually found a lot of people were dying indoors. And they found that a lot of the causes were things like they didn't have air conditioning because maybe they lived in an area that didn't used to need air conditioning. There were people who had air conditioning, but they were broken and they couldn't afford to fix them. Or there were people who had them and they were off because they couldn't afford the energy costs to run them. So we're seeing many areas of, and there are more vector-borne diseases. We're seeing more West Nile virus, things that are impacted by climate change. Allergies are huge. Plants, when they get exposed to higher levels of heat, they make lots of pollen, and they make more allergenic pollen. So we're seeing a lot of increased allergies, things like that. And there's other areas as well. It impacts a lot. Mental health can have impacts. Mm-hmm. I could go on.
Yeah. No, I think it's important information. Do you feel that the medical community, so you're in Maricopa County, is that correct?
I happen to live in Maricopa County. I do public health for the state.
Okay. Yeah. So are you finding that most medical professionals are on board with what you're saying? In terms of they're seeing effects of climate on public health at this point?
I think it is starting to, I think they are beginning to be aware. I think that sometimes if you don't understand those connections, you may see that you're having more asthma, children with asthma, or you may see that you're having more ER visits. But if you don't understand how heat, for example, if you're not making that connection, then you might not put the two together. And I think that we need to do probably a better job of making sure our medical students and our nurses are learning the way that climate impacts health so that they make those connections. And we need them to be, they're trusted, especially nurses. It's the most trusted profession. We're trusted voices, and I think it's really important that we learn more and are knowledgeable in this area so that we can advocate. I think it's being called the biggest health crisis of our time. Even as we talk about COVID, it's taking precedence, but this is a huge public health crisis.
And so I'm wondering, Rhonda, where did you learn about it? The public health impacts of climate change?
I think I started reading, so my family loves being outdoors. We do our vacations are often outdoor vacations, and I started noticing a lot of dead trees in Arizona and then all over the U.S. and a lot of national parks. So I became interested in, I was wondering what was happening, why so many trees were dying. So I started reading about bark beetles, and that led me how they're impacted by climate change, how the trees are impacted. And so I started reading more about climate change, and I think that started raising my concern, and I ended up, but I didn't know what to do. I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of people. They're worried about it, but we don't know what to do about it. It's this big problem, and we don't know what we can do. So in 2016, I found an organization, Citizens Climate Lobby, who actually had solutions. There were concrete things that I could do, and they would teach me how to do them. So that those Huffington Post articles were because of the mentoring that I received through Citizens Climate Lobby and the encouragement to go ahead and just write for them, write some letters to the editor. They do a lot of different types. People can do what interests them. So maybe you feel comfortable writing a letter to your editor, or maybe you would call your representative, again, with some coaching and help. So I started, and they also have people on to educate us about some of those aspects. And so I think probably through some of the education I received there, I started looking, and I'm a researcher. I'm a research nerd. I read anything health related. I love reading about it. So I probably did my own research too. The CDC has great. If you Google CDC public health, climate change public health, they have really great information.
Great. Just what I need. One more thing to take me down the rabbit hole. I'm with you too. I think Christine is, we're research fanatics.
And there's good information out there on the mental health impacts of climate change. Yeah, I can't remember the psychiatrist. Her name's escaping me, but she's been very active in Climate Reality, not in Citizens Climate Lobby, but talking about the adverse effects of climate change on mental health. Because
it's surprising. They've actually had studies showing higher temperatures, we see more suicides. It also impacts the people with mental health issues. If they're taking medications, a lot of times they're impacted by higher temperatures, and so it can impact mental health in more than one way.
It's also
and then also people who are sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's also interconnected. That both climate change with everything else, and our health. There's not just one layer of health. If your economic health isn't good, then probably your physical and your mental health is not as good as it could be.
And I really think about young people. They're very aware. They're not in denial overall. I think they're very much aware that climate change is a big deal and it's going to impact them very much. And I hear stories even about young people who are choosing not to have families, that they are that concerned about this issue. And that just makes me very sad. And so I think a lot of us who are thinking about these issues, especially if we're not sure what to do about it, it definitely impacts our mental health. And I know young people it is impacting their health, mental health especially. And
so within your job, can you just describe your job a little bit? And does this come up in the context of your job, or is this all extracurricular for you?
It comes up more often in my job because I bring it up. I am trying to advocate. I work with our Medicaid populations, which, if you're not familiar, that's our families who are low income. And I mostly, like I said, oversee the programs that impact maternal and child health. But, just today I was talking about, we saw a really great webinar last week. Someone presented from Colombia, I think it's Diane Hernandez, really great webinar on energy insecurity. And that's just when someone can't afford to meet their energy costs, their needs to stay safely cool enough or warm enough in colder places. And I know that I grew up very poor. I was actually a Medicaid recipient. So I know what it's like when you don't have the money to keep your house cool enough, or you don't quite have enough food. And I know that climate change impacts both our families that are living in poverty. They're being impacted first and worse because, you know, if there's an impact on the food chain supply and food prices go up, then it's our families, our vulnerable families who can't afford to pay a little bit more for that food. Or if, like in Phoenix, we shattered our temperature. So previous in 2011, we had 33 days above 110 degrees, and I think that's about 43 degrees Celsius for you can't.
Thank you.
My Canadian friends.
Appreciate that.
And we had 33 days above 110 in 2011. That was our record. This year we had 53. We shattered that record. And each of those days for our families that are struggling to cool their homes is just, they can't afford to cool their homes. And that's just, so I brought it up in that context that our families are really being impacted by these higher temperatures. And not only families that are on Medicare are poorest, but those that are kind of just above that level where they're working, but their homes aren't really well insulated. So they tend to pay a little more per square foot to cool them. And then our poorer neighborhoods also tend to be more heat islands. They don't have very much greenery to help cool it down. So their temperatures can be 10 to 15 degrees warmer than areas that are wealthier and have more greenery. So they have a higher burden, and then they have less ability to address that, to financially address the burden.
And so it's climate change is an inequality issue globally, but it also is an inequality issue locally, is what I hear you saying.
Definitely. It is in many ways, yes.
So do we have any good news about climate change and health? I think we have some awesome news that has...
We had some awesome news about Jeff Bezos.
Yes. Did you hear this, Rhonda?
I don't think so. Amazon, right?
You've got your notes in front of you, Rose, so you...
I don't.
Okay. I'll grab it because... So we might have maligned Mr. Bezos on this podcast before.
Imagine that.
For the wastefulness of Amazon. But we've decided he's a bit less of a villain this week because...
I'm not convinced, but...
Well, he is, because he has just rolled out...
He made a commitment a number of months ago that he was going to give, I think, $1 billion towards climate change.
$10 billion Earth Fund.
$10 billion.
And so he rolled out the first wave, which is $791 million. It's been allocated.
Wow. And who has he allocated that to?
The Environmental Defense Fund, the Natural Resources Defense Council, the Nature Conservancy, the World Resources Institute, and the World Wildlife Fund.
Nice.
The balance of the money will be distributed among several lesser-known entities like the Green for All, the Hive Fund for Climate and Gender Justice, and the Solutions Project, which I love, the Solutions Project. So I think that's great news.
It is good news.
Yeah, it is good news. Yeah, I could be wrong, but haven't they also committed to having more electric transportation?
Yeah, I think he's said that his entire fleet of delivery vans at some point is going to become electric. I know he's placed a huge order with Tesla.
That's what I thought. Okay, that's what I was thinking. Their trucks, his trucks. Okay.
Yes. So FYI,
that's good too. You might have to change your mind, Rose.
I just want him to pay his people.
Yeah.
I just want him to pay his people and give them benefits and health care.
Yeah, because it's great to donate all the, gajillions of money that you have. I mean, this is just a little, even 10 billion is not very much compared to what he has. But if he actually paid his workers more, especially during a pandemic, they stepped up. But FYI, on the electric car side of things, Rose, Ronda and I are also part of the Facebook group, Women Drive Electric.
Oh, I joined that too.
Did you? Oh, well, you're not. So we had a good laugh on it this week.
Why?
I don't know if I agreed to share this information.
Uh-oh.
Well, we don't have to, but we were just talking about
I'm just
investing.
kidding.
We were talking about investing, and because somebody asked a question about, are people invested in EV companies and funds? And so I think wasn't it you, Rhonda, who said that you had read a book that the advice was to invest in what's useful and what you like to use? What was that story?
Yeah, it was actually the Rocket Boys. It's about Homer Hickam, I think, that he, as a child, he was very smart. Now I'm like trying to remember. I love the book, but of course right now I cannot think of all the details of it. But his mother, she invested in things like Band-Aids and I can't remember some of the other products, but just things that she liked and she found very useful. She invested in them. And over time, she was actually the one that was able to afford to send him off to school. He was from a very, very small rural community. And she sent him off to school I probably become a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
But by investing in products that she liked. And I thought that made a lot of sense.
Yeah. So then the conversation.
So you and I would, sorry, I keep interrupting.
No.
So you and I would invest in Tesla.
Yes.
Well, if you had
EVs.
invested before last week, you would have done very well because I think their shares surged this week.
Yes. And I did. So yes.
Nice.
I'll treat you guys for lunch the next time we meet in person. But
Okay.
I'm not flying you anywhere, but I'll meet
come on.
for lunch. But then the joke went on, well, what's useful? And somebody said like really comfy bras. And
that was me also.
and then somebody else said, what? We're supposed to be wearing them? It just degenerated from there. I did more people not to invest in cosmetics because those sales have dropped with COVID. So there you go. Yeah. But we digress. So we've got good news from Amazon, and we usually have an action tip and a sanity tip. So I'm thinking because Rhonda brought up Citizens Climate Lobby, and I don't know if you know this, Rhonda, but I was one of the 3 people who brought Citizens Climate Lobby to Canada back in 2010. So
wow.
It has a wonderful way of getting people moving into action, like you pointed out. CCL gives very concrete action. They're big on education. They have monthly education calls, and they are a real star. Hopefully Bezos will give some of his money to them. I'm not sure, but I know he's giving it to the Rocky Mountain Institute, who does amazing work in clean technology. But anyway, so how about our action tip is people will post a link to Citizens Climate Lobby, both US and Canada. And there's other chapters across the world, but including in Australia, but I'm not sure if they're quite as active. The one in the US is I think the most, well, that's where it started, obviously in California. That's where it's the most active.
Okay, we talked about Citizens Climate Lobby last time too, so you need to reach out to Mark Reynolds. Yeah. Then we usually have a sanity tip too. So when you hear all this, when you see, I guess in your profession, all this, the impacts of climate change, how do you keep yourself sane? What do you do to kind of make it not seem overwhelming?
I am a tango dancer, and I go and do something that I absolutely love and get lots of hugs and laughter. And so it's been really hard because COVID has put a serious long pause on my favorite. So right now, I actually spend time in my garden and just watch it. We have hummingbirds throughout the year that are in my yard, and they always come and hang out while I'm out there, and that's my peace place.
That's my peace place too.
I'm going to sign off.
It was nice meeting you. It was so nice to actually chat with you a little bit, Christine.
Yeah, no.
I appreciate you on Facebook so much.
Oh, thank you. And likewise, we, Rhonda is always educating her Facebook audience about climate change. Yeah.
Whether they like it or not.
Yep. Yep. You're one of us, or we're one of you. You're our kind of people.
Yeah.
Love it. Nice to meet you. Thank you, Rose.
That's this week's Friday episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for me.